This is Judith Lay welcoming you to Manx Radio and to the podcast of this week's edition of At Your Service. Manx Radio! Weather permitting, this evening, one of our island's clergy will be crossing the Irish Sea to start what he describes as his next adventure. It's not an exotic holiday, it's retirement. And on today's programme, I'll be chatting with Monsignor John Devine, the senior Roman Catholic priest on the island, who for the last 10 years has been parish priest of St Mary of the Island St Joseph here in Douglas and St Anthony in Onken. We'll be looking back over some 50 years of ministry, as well as finding out what he'll remember most about his time in St Mary's. And he's also chosen our hymns. Guide me, O the great Redeemer, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. Bread of heaven, bread of heaven, feed me now and evermore. Feed me now and evermore. Oh, and now the crystal fountain whence thy healing stream doth flow. Let the fiery calling pillar lead me all my journey through. Strong deliverer, be thou still my strength and shield. Be thou still my strength and shield. When I tread the verge of Jordan, lead my anxious fears subside. Death of death and hell's destruction, land me safe on Canaan's side. Songs of praises, I will ever give to thee. I will ever give to thee. Songs of praises, I will ever give to Guide Me, O Thy Great Redeemer, sung there by the BBC Radio 4 Daily Service Singers. The first hymn choice of my guest today, Monsignor John Devine, who retires today after 10 years as the island's senior Roman Catholic priest. To me, those 10 years seem to have flown by. I can clearly remember our first interview when Monsignor John talked about his decision in the 1970s to join the Liverpool Archdiocesan Missionary Programme, to volunteer as a young priest to go to South America, to Peru. His first years of ministry were in busy cities. Then he moved to the much harsher conditions in the mountains. But for me, the standout moment was the story of the young South American man who'd been so touched by Father John's teaching that he had become a priest.
That was in my final week in Peru after being there 9 years, and a young priest came up to me and said, "You won't remember me." He said, "I was in your confirmation class," which was at the other end of the country, 9 years before. And it was my first assignment there, and I was still struggling with the language, and I'd been put in charge of this confirmation program, and I was feeling very inadequate about it. And yet, I think it's a feature of my time in Peru, and it's been replicated in other places as well, that probably as a priest, we're most effective when we don't realise. And that often when we're contriving to make something happen, we try too hard and it has the opposite effect. And that the grace of God working through us is far more effective when we're not even aware of it.
You came back then and you said, I was unemployable because you found it too much of a contrast to cope with so much consumerism, so much choice, everything so seemingly luxurious compared to the lifestyle you'd had.
One of the consequences of living side by side with people who have nothing is that you get a glimpse of how they view the world through their eyes, which is a matter of life and death. Hunger, having, food on the table, having no water. The example I cited was in Peru. There was a golf course where even the fairways were irrigated with sprinklers alongside a shanty town of several 100,000 people where there was no running water at all. Now, given that situation, things are very clear as to whether something is right or wrong, life or death, just or unjust. And reading the scriptures, reading the Gospels through the eyes of those people, they see the Bible message in a similar clarity. And they think Jesus is talking about them, which he is. And then to transport yourself back to a world of comparative affluence, you lose that clarity of purpose. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm not saying that it's the fault of the people living here, but you can bring that anger back with you and you can dump it on people here. A priest friend of mine came back from Peru and was appointed to a parish in Liverpool, and he was always banging on about Peru. The people drew him aside one day and said, "Look, Father, it's not our fault we don't live in Peru."
But you came back with a burning social conscience, and that led you into a role that put you really in the heart of local government as a very powerful Christian witness.
Yes, one of the things that Latin America taught me was that even though I went to South America as a priest, it was the cultural difference, actually living in a different culture. And you realize that some of the things that you thought were absolutes, the right way to do things, actually people do things differently. And initially you think it's inferior, then maybe you fall in love with the place and you think it's better. And then you suddenly settle down and you think, well, it's just different. Now, the challenge is, what do you do with that frame of mind when you come back, to our society here? And I always had this image of keeping doors open, having a foot in both camps. So that worked then, working on behalf of the church, but working with government at local, regional and national level. You're actually got a foot in both camps. And one of the things I discovered, I felt more comfortable dealing with the non-church going world. I found the challenge of actually presenting the church and what the church does in a totally secular environment, sitting in an office with 400 other people who knew I was a priest, but I didn't dress as a priest. And engaging with them, and the chats at the photocopier and all the rest of it, I found it quite refreshing, really. I was employed on behalf of all the Christian denominations. And then increasingly, it became impossible to engage with government unless I found I could speak on behalf of the other world faiths. So I set up this Northwest Forum of Faiths, with Jews, Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims, and, the whole spectrum of people of other faiths, and making a case for the contribution all faith communities actually make to society. And I was working in a very hard-nosed, it was the Northwest Regional Development Agency, which is economically driven. So I had to make a case for what were we actually bringing to the table. So therefore, we did a survey of every place of worship in the whole of the Northwest, which was like hundreds, which took 2 years. And then we did an economic impact assessment of that contribution. But one of the things we discovered was that all the faith communities were strongest in areas of multiple deprivation, where all the other agencies were absent. Well, in the sense that they all went home at night, whether they were teachers or policemen or medical staff or whatever. They didn't live in those areas, and we did. So we sold ourselves as the conduit for government to reach the hard to reach. So getting involved in all that kind of dialogue was really fascinating. The fundamental option for the poor. That's where your priority lies. In some ways, you leave the wealthy to take care of themselves. Now, that doesn't work either because they all carry burdens. I mean, one of the things I introduced since I've been in the Isle of Man is this novena to Mary Untier of Knots. I could talk at length about that. It goes back to St. Irenaeus in the 2nd century and linking up with Eve, in the story of creation. We live our lives, in tangled knots. And there's this painting of Mary with this ribbon, which is in knots, which she's kind of untying. The notion is we all have these knots. We all share these knots. We lead messy lives. If we don't, well, the people we love do. Often it's parents worrying about their children and their grandchildren, and there's sickness, there's bereavement, there's loss, there's a whole load of things. Now, they're across the board. You don't have to be poor to suffer in that way. So the people who tended that novena, which they did, they supported it amazingly, were a cross-section sociologically of the parish, but they were all carrying those burdens, and that's what they had in common.
You've done several of the novenas, and they've all been well supported, and they are often ecumenically led. You will invite leaders from other denominations.
Sure.
So you've chosen a very, very traditional Roman Catholic hymn, Hail Queen of Heaven. Is that in any way, that choice, inspired by these novenas?
Absolutely. Now, that hymn is actually a loose translation of a medieval Latin hymn, Ave Maris Stella, Hail Star of the Sea. This hymn, it's actually turning to Mary with our burdens. I mean, Catholics, we don't pray to Mary. We ask her to pray with us and for us. It's biblically based.
Often people misunderstand the role of Mary in the Roman Catholic Church, so it's good to set that straight. So after this time where you were in government and being the voice of the churches of all faiths, was it from that you then came to the island?
Pretty much. It was winding down. I had been based in Warrington. Initially, the ecumenical job I did was full-time. Then I took over a very small parish. And then as I began to relinquish that role, I took over 2 further parishes in Warrington, but it was only for about 3 years before I was asked to come to the Isle of Man.
And the other thing I remember you saying to me when we had our first conversation, you said, I've got one more adventure left in me.
It's been wonderful. There's been unexpected bonuses. I mean, one of the key things, I think all of our lives have been infected by COVID, and a whole new ministry evolved, an online ministry. Unfortunately, we'd inadvertently anticipated that by installing live streaming facilities in the church prior to that, just to accommodate people living off island or who were in care homes or housebound, so they could join in services. But we discovered a whole new online congregation of people that was international. A lot of North Americans still follow us. Our 12 daily mass is followed by people on the eastern seaboard of the United States, and we still hear from them. And they ask us to pray for their intentions. We have people from Australia, South America, and Europe, India, Africa. That's all totally unexpected.
But I think also the thing that has got to be a standout moment is the creation of the co-cathedral of St Mary of the Isle becoming a co-cathedral.
I can't really take credit for it because it was an approach from the Douglas City Council, because I was chaplain to the mayor at various times for 4 years. And again, sometimes you wonder why you do things. But one of the things I discover in life, it's not just a priest, but it's probably of everybody's lives, there's never a moment wasted. And sometimes you wonder why you do something and why I committed so much time to being chaplain and turning up regularly for meetings. But then they approached me and said, look, we're a city and we haven't got a cathedral. And the Anglicans couldn't help because their cathedral was in Peel. And I said, well, for the same reason we can't help either, because our cathedral's in Liverpool. But then subsequent research revealed that in other parts of the world, not in the British Isles, there is a precedent for co-cathedrals. So that's the way that happened.
And the special circumstance that makes it possible to have a second or co-cathedral is when a single archdiocese is spread over 2 completely separate jurisdictions. And that's the case here, where the Catholic Church on the island is part of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Liverpool.
I have personal little sort of things I'm proud about. I mean, one of the big ones I'm really proud of is we got new toilets in St Mary's Church. I mean, the original toilets were the bane of my life. They were always getting blocked, and I was the muggins who had to unblock them. So I had a good motive, These things always happen in an emergency, and the priest is always the guy, because he's like the janitor, the priest. I mean, but then a close second is being made into a cathedral, yes.
Your hymn choice is a great, rousing hymn of praise.
It's a fantastic melody, Cum Rondo, but the words are rooted biblically. There's references to the whole story of the Exodus and coming to the banks of Jordan and then crossing the Jordan. And we all have to cross the Jordan many times. It's steeped in biblical imagery, and it's the journey we all make. We're constantly on the move.
And talking of journeys, from the moment you were ordained to the moment that God calls you home, you will be a priest. How do you see your priesthood in retirement?
You spoke before about the Isle of Man being my last adventure, but I've revised that. Maybe retirement is the last adventure. I couldn't keep up the pace of here. It'll be quite nice to be able to help out and respond, because there's a shortage of priests, but also at a time and a pace of my choosing. So once a priest, always a priest. But I'm looking forward to being John Devine as well for a change, because as a priest, people project all kinds of stuff onto you. And it's really wearing if you don't conform to the model that they want or expect. It's very humbling, really. I mean, I've been really moved by the sheer volume of cards and gifts, often from people that really I haven't had all that much to do with, or who've kept a low profile and they've written some lovely things and they've recalled things I'd forgotten about. A lot of them to do with bereavement situations and things. I mean, I've lived with death on a daily basis. I've seen people through their death and done their funeral, and I've been with families, and you're privileged to spend a time of real intensity with people in that situation.
And it's good that you are made to realise what you have put into people's lives, because that's what priestly ministry is about. Whether it's a bereavement here in St Mary's or a young man who goes into the priesthood because of some example that you set him. That's ministry, isn't it?
I'm very blessed. See, God is always faithful and never lets you down.
My thanks to my guest today, Monsignor John Devine, reflecting not just on the last 10 years as senior Roman Catholic priest on the island, but looking back over his 52 years of priesthood. The final chance to thank him for his ministry here and wish him a long and happy retirement will come later this morning as Monsignor John celebrates his final Mass at 11 a.m. this morning in St Mary's on Hill Street here in Douglas. He leaves the island this evening to start his retirement in Liverpool. Succession is usually seamless in the Roman Catholic Church, and so, tomorrow morning, Canon Philip Gillespie moves to St Mary's as Monsignor John's successor. During his last 10 years as rector of the Beda College in Rome, Canon Philip has always considered the island to be his home, returning each year during college holidays. And if you're a regular listener, you'll know he's also sent us many reports on Vatican life for this programme. And so, as soon as he's had time to unpack, I hope he'll join us again to talk about his homecoming and to perhaps share something of his vision for the future of the Church here. But for now, we wish him a long and very happy ministry on the island. And before we completely run out of time, let's take a look at this week's notice board. And we're starting with 2 events in Dalby Church on the West Coast. And both of these are linked to the week of 24/7 global prayer that starts tomorrow. Christians from across the island are joining the 24/7 Global Week of Prayer by committing to taking just half an hour at any time of the day or night, sometime in the next 7 days, to pray. You can pray on your own or with others, pray in silence or aloud, drop into a church while it's open during the day and pray there. Pray for the world, for our island, or those issues and concerns that are on your heart and mind. And I'm sure we'd agree that right now our world stands in need of the power of prayer. So, to start the week, there'll be a reflective Songs of Praise service this evening, Sunday the 31st, in Dalby Church at 6:30, with thoughts and reflections on hope and faith as we enter the week of 24/7 global prayer. This is a gentle time of worship with a warm welcome for everyone. Then, on Friday the 5th, also as part of the week of global prayer, there'll be a prayer vigil from 6 p.m. to midnight, again in Dalby Church, open to anyone to come and stay for as long or as short a time as you wish. There'll be prayer reflections available in the church and in the schoolrooms, with short, led community prayer in the church on the hour, each hour. There'll also be light refreshments available throughout the evening. Tomorrow, Monday the 1st, it's Super Monday in the lounge at Colby Methodist Church. Homemade soup with fresh bread, followed by tea or coffee, will be served between noon and 1:30. No charge, but donations to cover costs are always welcome. On Tuesday morning, there's a coffee morning in Ballafesson Chapel Hall. The kettle will be boiling between 10 and 11:30, and everyone's welcome. On Tuesday evening, it's film night in Castletown Methodist Church. Doors open at 7 o'clock. It is a free evening, but donations to church funds would be appreciated. On now to Wednesday evening, and St Thomas's Church here in Douglas, off the promenade near the Gaiety Theatre, invite you to an hour of music for all tastes from Londu Male Voice Choir. It starts at 7:45 with free admission, delicious homemade cakes afterwards, and a retiring collection where donations would be most welcome. And also at St Thomas's, but next Sunday, that's the 7th, there'll be a pet service. That's next Sunday morning in St Thomas's at 11 a.m. All furry friends are welcome, as well as photos of pets who might not enjoy sitting in church. And as always at St Thomas's, there'll be refreshments afterwards. On Thursday evening, this week's concert in St Catherine's Church in Port Erin will be given by Castletown Metropolitan Silver Band. It starts at 7:30 with free admission, refreshments afterwards and a retiring collection. Heating heritage buildings is a subject close to many hearts, especially as we start to approach the cooler weather. And a visitor with a lot of experience to share will be giving a free talk all about heating heritage buildings using energy-efficient solutions. He is Adrian Fox, and his talk will be this Thursday, September the 4th, in St Andrew's United Reformed Church on Glencrutchery Road here in Douglas. It starts with tea and coffee at 6:30, then the talk will start at 7 p.m. and will be finished by 8:30. It's free to attend, and if you need more information, ring or text Louise Whiteleg on 474275. 474275. Looking ahead to next weekend and two events for next Saturday, September the 6th. The first is the very popular monthly craft market in Glenmay Chapel and Community Centre, open on Saturday the 6th from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m, with homemade produce and all kinds of handicrafts by local artists. Entry is, as always, free, with homemade light lunches, bacon baps, drinks and cakes on sale. Just head for Glenmay and look out for the bunting and the banners. Then next Saturday evening, there's another community concert at the Salvation Army in Braddon, in their beautiful new building in Ballacotia Crescent on the Isle of Man Business Park. There's a brilliant lineup of guests, including Nicola O'Connor and Helen Ferner, Jess Quigley, Angela Stewart, Christine Brugazzi, Julie Brew, and the group Folkish. It starts at 7:30 and admission is only £5, including light refreshments. You don't need to book in advance. There's plenty of room for everyone in the lovely new Salvation Army Hall, which has comfy chairs, lots of parking and easy step-free access. And that's all that we have time for now, but I'll be back tonight at 9 o'clock with Sundown, your invitation to join me in our virtual lounge for late night listening with your requests and dedications, and I'd love you to join me if you can. So, until whenever we meet again, this is Judith saying thank you for listening, and I wish you and those you love a blessed and peaceful week and a very good morning.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.